Ordered the zoning board appeals meeting, the Village of Cold Spring. It is April 4th, 2018. John Martin is here and Donald McDonald is here, and I'm Aaron Wolf, and maybe Elliot Hammond will show up for too long. We've got two things on the agenda. A public hearing for 5 Ferris Street for an addition and a side yard variance, and then we're going to interview Eric Worth for the open board seat. Eric, do you have anywhere to be urgently? We could interview you first if you need to get back to the shop or anything.
That would be helpful, if that's convenient for you.
Okay. Do you mind if we take 10 minutes to talk to you?
Not at all.
Okay. So, Eric, tell us why you want to be on the board and what your
well, because you asked
qualifications
me, and I'm happy to. I feel like I want to contribute to the village and the operations of the village, and I think I can do this job. So I'm happy to pitch in.
Okay. And do you have any particular qualifications that you think might apply to?
Well, I do have a general interest in, as the owner of a home that is under constant renovation, I have an interest in some of the issues covered by this board, but I think I'm qualified. I don't have any specialization that is related to zoning or building permits, but I do. I've worked all my life as an editor, and I think I'm very good at processing documents, understanding technical materials, digesting documents quickly, and information. So I'm hoping that will be sufficient.
Okay. And you're a co-owner of a business on Main Street?
Correct. Yes.
What is it?
It's Flower Cup Wine, the wine store across the street.
You can be fair. You can be fair.
Oh, yes.
It's the
I
hard
think
thing on this, not hard, but it's the basic.
objective. Yeah, I think
You gotta be objective and fair.
again, that having worked as an editor, objectivity is one of the primary traits needed in editing people's writing, and I think that's has trained me in seeing another person's point of view in an issue on a subject in which they are invested.
Yeah, the editing sounds pretty important for this type of work, in the sense that there's a lot of nuances in the records, and you have to look at things in a new way and objectively, and be able to pick out, small things that may become a problem, in the future. But you look at the broad scope of a plan, but you're also looking at small pieces that maybe one member or another may miss. So that would be valuable to have that meticulous insight. So thanks. Thanks for volunteering.
Would there be any kind of worry about conflict of interest, since Eric probably has many village residents as his customers, and I don't know that any of the rest of us do, except for maybe you. I don't know.
He would state it if that wasn't in fact the case. I mean, any one of us would state that.
It's very likely some of the people coming before the board would be customers that I knew through the shop. And
But you're one of 5 votes,
yes.
and
You could also ask, and we could open the issue, to the board on any particular matter, that if there's felt to be in any way a conflict of interest prior to a vote, or sitting on a matter, either you or the applicant would so state, and that would become part of the record. So it would be on a case-by-case matter. So it really wouldn't, it's not just a broad scope.
I mean, the nature of a small retail shop is you don't have intense business ties with any customer. It's a fairly small. The scale of the business is small. It's just bottles of wine. So it's not. I believe it's not. There's not a huge. I don't have a huge tie to any particular village resident through this store. It's a fairly casual and small time.
I'm not expecting that it would happen, but if something were to happen that involved, or if something were to come before you that you felt was a conflict of interest, then that would be your responsibility to disclose that
Yes,
to us.
yeah.
Who knows, you might find somebody wants to come in and buy 10 cases of wine the week before their public hearing or something.
Yeah, but I obviously, yeah, would have to be alert to questionable occurrences like that.
Okay.
But there could be a lot of hypotheticals in life that draw conflicts, and we, it's a small village.
Yeah,
and
I think-
we all know a lot of folks here, so.
Exactly. Any resident of the village has social ties that are quite extensive.
We've had members come before us, whether they're representing people in expertise or, even applicants who sit on the same boards that we do. Like, for instance, the State Parks Board, Little Stony Point Citizens Association and so forth. So it'll happen, but the idea is we're all objective and we're just trying to maintain and uphold the intent of the zoning law. And the ideas of what the village wants to see as a character of the community, as far as structures and development and uses. So
I think it's good we have a sharp one around the board.
I do
You know, I
too.
think we need variety, and if there was some issue came up, there are five people on the board,
Mhm.
It's easy to recuse yourself and it's over, You're out of it. And I'm sure you look like, you talk like a person who knows how to, make that distinguishing. If something came up and you didn't feel comfortable, as any of us would, just say so.
And we meet, as you know, the first and third Thursday
Mhm.
at 7:30. Our meetings are usually pretty quick, but sometimes they can go for a few hours.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be every Thursday and every Monday. I mean, there's times when there's not matters
Right.
before us.
Those are the scheduled, we often cancel if there's nothing before the board. And that works for you?
Yes, that does work.
Okay. So we don't actually make the appointment, we just recommend the appointment to the village board. Would anyone like to make a motion
Yeah,
to
I'll
make a
move to have
recommendation?
Eric become considered, as a board member by the village board.
Okay, great.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Eric. So
Thank you.
we'll recommend you to the village board and be in touch.
All right.
Could you spell your last name?
WIRTH.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good night.
appreciate it.
Okay, next up is the public hearing for 5 Fair Street. Sure, I'm gonna read the public hearing notice and then I can find it.
Maybe we'll move it a little closer. Can we move it and angle it a little closer?
It's fine there.
Oh, is it fine
Yeah.
there?
I can
Okay, all
come.
right,
Just
good.
tilt it a little bit so Kathleen can see, there we go.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, you have to be here.
I know,
Really?
I told you.
Hold my hand.
Okay, please take notice that the zoning board of appeals for the village of Cold Spring will hold a public hearing on Thursday, April 5th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard at the Village Hall, 85 Main Street, Cold Spring, New York, 10516, to consider the application by Kathleen Gordonier and Jennifer Gordonier of 5 Fair Street for the following: a side yard setback variance to allow the building to have less of a setback than required by village code. The public notice originally contained a variance for a lot area, but that has been removed. The applicant is proposing an addition to the back of the house, which will require moving basement access into the side yard setback. The subject property is located at 5 Fair Street, Cold Spring, New York, and designated as tax map section 48.8-1-1. Property is located within the R1 zoning district, as well as both the National Register Historic District and the village's local historic district. The application materials and revised plans may be inspected at the village Cold Spring clerk's office, located right over there, during normal business hours. Okay, so why don't you hand us now the green things.
All right, I'm ready. These are like gold bars. I'm happy to get rid of them.
Okay,
There are 7 of them.
so we've got 2 stone, we've got 4 stone, 6 stone,
Okay.
72,
Yep.
76 main, 80 main, 7 fair, and 10 fair.
Done.
Okay. So,
Do you
present,
want us to
please.
start
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
give, do you want us to explain why the lot variance has been removed, or do you just
Um,
want us to get into
you're-
the project itself?
Please just go ahead and explain the entire project from the beginning, assuming that the public has not heard.
Okay.
So the project started as or intends to expand the first floor by squaring off the footprint of the house where the existing access is to the basement. And that will allow to enlarge the existing kitchen, which is rather tight and small. And that'll allow also for better flow because there's gonna be an opening from the dining room to the kitchen, so there's gonna create a better circulation pattern. The kitchen, as you can see in the picture in the back, is a single-story structure covering about 2/3 of the back wall. So it's going to extend all the way to the driveway to line up with the with the north wall of the house. And then on top of it is going to be a second floor addition, which will create adequate bedrooms for the children and a new bathroom. Right now there's 1 bathroom only, actually 1 bathroom in the house. Well, on the second floor rather. So this will allow to create an additional bathroom which will be used for the kids, and this is the master bathroom then, and they will both have adequate bedrooms, closets, and access directly to the bathroom. This is all built over the existing footprint of the kitchen plus the squaring off of the first floor elevation of the first floor footprint. So in recalculating the lot area coverage or the building coverage, we originally included the deck, but the deck really does not, according to the zoning ordinance of Cold Spring, is not included in the building coverage, and that's really where the change happened. The existing basement access is being relocated to the south side of the house, where there's a small porch and stair to the house. So right behind it is going to be a sort of a custom Bilco door that'll have the stair going down to the basement, so there's access for equipment, maintenance and things like that. And so the only other thing that's proposed is over the deck there's going to be exposed trellis work, which is just individual wooden beams that create a little bit of a shading of the back deck area, but no roof.
Currently, there's a roof over
And
there.
currently there is
Yes.
there's a small porch that actually has a roof, which we're removing, and that's why we actually achieved very slight decrease in the lot coverage, because the footprint of the deck, of the porch rather, is slightly bigger than what we're adding to
Right,
the side.
you're offsetting it.
We're offsetting it, and basically it's a wash.
And that's your driveway in the
That
And
is
that's
our
a
driveway,
yes,
correct.
correct.
Do you know specifically what percentage of a wash it is? I mean, it's certainly.
It's
it
a
comes-
difference between, it's such a small, it's actually, what is it, 4 square feet.
Okay,
It's 1461 square feet existing and 1457 was going to be is proposed.
1457, so you're increasing it slightly, the
We're
footprint?
decreasing it by 4
Oh,
square feet.
decreasing, got it.
The area
Ten
of
square.
the screened-in porch is less than the area of, I mean, is more than the area of the addition.
Of the addition,
of the-
correct.
Of the
Yes,
sides.
So
yeah.
we're actually decreasing,
Correct,
Yeah,
because everything else is remaining the same in terms of footprint.
exactly, right.
correct.
But this picture gives a good idea of the
Right.
squaring. So I was saying to Kathy, this one is actually pretty good on, I never thought this looked good on the house because it obviously was a porch at one time and somebody turned it into a kitchen. So the goal of the project is to make this part of the house, it's like I think I said to you last time, almost telescope it, so it squares. So it doesn't have, the house doesn't have the protrusion of that that porch, so it looks more conforming, like one building.
The end result is going to be that the gable end on the back of the house is getting extended from where it ends currently to the end of the existing first floor wall where the kitchen is, and this dashed line actually indicates the existing roof of the kitchen. So we're basically adding the bulk of this area, extending this rear gable to the back wall
Yeah,
of the
you're
house.
popping it out
Yeah.
flush too.
And the addition on the east side,
Yes, on north side.
that, on the, it's the emergency, your new emergency
Oh,
basement.
here, oh, yes.
That side. So, is this lot qualify for the small lot exception for setback?
For setback, it'd have to be under, it's 70 feet.
What I'm getting to is that, that addition is actually in the setback, if it's a 10-foot setback.
That's correct.
That's
Right.
Yes.
And my question is, when we're talking about side yard setbacks, I know we have one for the emergency exit. But then, do we have a side yard setback issue on the addition?
On the addition on the north side.
Yeah, on the, what would be on this side
On
of
the
the building?
south side.
South,
So
The north side, the
so
northwest side?
the setback is 10 feet required,
right.
and currently the house is 8 feet to 8.2 feet according to the survey in the back. So
Yeah, but you're adding on another story, right?
correct,
And
same
that story,
footprint,
the
same
added on
footprint
story is in the
correct.
plane of
of the
the
setback.
setback.
Yes,
So,
that's right.
it becomes an issue for zoning if in fact you can apply a small yard exception to that. And I'm not clear on that issue in terms of how we're treating this property.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is, there's no doubt about what you're raising is that the structure is gonna become more, dense, it's gonna become bigger.
Right.
And in that way, it would,
It gets to something
Make a
that
side
I'm
yard.
concerned about, and that is the idea that and we've been doing, I've been on this thing for 20, 30 years, 25 years, and I've heard this all the time, and the idea of squaring off is somehow better. Don't take this personally, you're the nicest people in the world, okay?
Yeah.
It's got nothing to do with you.
no, but it's a matter of density.
Yeah.
But
And,
the idea is, okay, we have our house and we just want to extend it. It's not telescoping, it's extending. Telescoping is you're getting a little smaller as you
I see,
telescope
yeah.
out, okay? And typically and the first mistake, it's a beautiful house, but the first mistake was the addition and back, making it align with the end of the gable, and you don't get the feeling of the original gable, two-story with a gable roof. You see it on the roof, but not in the building. And now somebody put an addition well before you, and they lined it up, and now you're lining it up. And I've heard this for so long, and I've kind of gone along with it, and I'm not going to go along with it anymore. I'm not saying that I'm going to vote against you. I'm just raising it. That the idea with the squaring off and keep going back, we keep doing this on all these houses, and they don't look like.
It becomes a density issue.
That
It's
was our-
bulk, and it is,
It is
frankly,
bulk.
it's from the public way. You can, there it is, and I'm just raising it as an issue. I think you can probably apply this small yard setback to this thing and this project, because the lot is less than the 65 feet, I think,
That's right, I think it's under 134.17.
and it's 7.5 feet
Yeah,
minimum,
right,
and then 4 inches per every foot of lot
Right.
width, and I think you get 15. I put the
15.
calc in the back.
that's right.
And so they have it, and then it's not an issue. So
Right.
I just told you why what I say you don't have to listen to, okay?
Well,
But I'm
it's
just
not
saying it
necessary,
because I
but-
wanted to get in the public
But
record.
it's important that, it's all put on the record too, because, these are serious issues because, it's light effects, and air effects, and these lots are relatively small. And, go ahead.
That was my biggest concern right off the bat, and Kathy and I had talked about this. We had some friends over. We love our backyard there, 5 Fair Street. I worked on that thing for 15 years, get everything just like so. And my biggest concern was, is this gonna be so overwhelming that it's gonna be like, I'm gonna sit on my porch and have this house up on me? that was a big part of the consideration is, and I understand that point of view. That was my first concern. I said, Kathy, is this gonna be so overwhelming that we're gonna like
The gable
lose
end of
our
it is-
airspace?
Well, even maybe the neighbors would think that, you know, if you don't, I mean, but it's something that is an impressionable impact. Even though it's going straight up and following the old lines, it's still covering
Yeah,
space that
airspace.
sets out one property and house and structure from another. And those are the things that we have to be concerned about.
Now, does it take into consideration, like, because years after our 7 Fair Street is more in the Victorian model, it covers the natural length of the house, covers more length. So if you were looking at the house, I believe their house is probably, well, ours is a little more towards the road, but their house extends farther back. It's not like they have open yard and then our house is going past there. I don't even think this would bring us to the west end of their structure.
And is this the
That would be
structure
7 Fair
referencing-
Street would be over here.
Okay, right next to you.
So the- I
Right,
think
so
it's
you,
the back
you
of
can
their
actually
house.
see it, that's the front
Right.
of their house.
Well, see, this is what keeps happening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then the next person says, well, you know, just to show that you were in conformity with the community, there are other houses that are further set back. And-
No, I was just asking you.
No,
if
no,
you-
but that's what we do. We usually cross-compare,
Oh, okay.
you know, how, you know, even on the front end and front yard setbacks, you know, how houses line up,
Mhm.
you know, for the line of sight, you know, for anybody walking up and down the street, just to
Mhm.
keep some kind of conformity rather than haphazard development.
Yes.
And the same would perhaps go, you know, to the backside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and particularly on, you know, when I say small, lots that are not of substantial acreage, and you've got houses just on the flip side, sort of coming in the same direction as to where you might be building out.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all, these are issues that we look at,
Mm-hmm.
and these are considerations that we have to, you know, make when we look at these requests for variances. So we'll double check on that small yard.
Well, I think that we should,
Let's continue with the presentation,
All right.
and
Okay,
then
go
we
ahead.
can, we can get into
All right.
questions when it's done.
So you left off with the fact that you were taking the back area of the porch that was covered and using it to cover the northwest side,
No,
allow the
doing-
addition to square out the
So
building.
Therefore, there's no increase
And
in
then- and then
the
raise
lot
it.
coverage.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
There's a picture actually that I think Kathy took from the second floor windows, which kind of looks into the backyard, and it gives you a little bit of an insight of what goes on in the backyard and how the heights relates to the adjacent properties. It is.
We dealt with that, Donald, before when you were on the board, the garage that was right there that they sought to convert it to living space.
oh, this here?
You remember that? Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's pretty much it. The access to the basement is hidden from view. It's right next to the existing porch. That's really what we're asking for the variance for, because that's the closest piece of construction that's to the property line, which is why we asked for 3.8 feet. And then the one-story structure that becomes two-story is in line with the existing house, having 8.2 foot setback to the southern property line.
I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I think the only issue is what part of the code are we applying to this thing?
Yeah,
Because it's important, just because you grant a 3.8 foot or whatever it is setback for an emergency egress, it doesn't mean you got, we can, that's our setback on this side for everything.
Of course.
If the
I
second
thi-
floor, if it doesn't apply, if it doesn't qualify for a small exception, then we need to write a variance for the second floor addition as well.
It looks, so the lot width appears to be what, 45 feet
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
on the street? So, I mean, that, my understanding is well under it. I think it's 70 feet. Is that at 130?
I think,
or
I
70?
can find that.
I think
Let's see if there's any, if we're done with the presentation,
Okay.
then we can get
Go ahead.
into our
Yeah,
Are we?
45.
Yeah, well, this site plan is based on a survey which,
Yep, and
is,
that was part of the application.
from 87. So, it is a small 4,500 square foot lot. Oh, less than that, actually, about 4,000 square foot lot. It's 88 by 45. So the lot area is 3987. And the lot coverage is 36%. That's it. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
So the new side entrance to the south of the house, is that a step-up area to get to the first floor? Is it just
Correct.
or
No,
is it a step
yeah,
down?
there's a step up
Uh-huh.
to the first floor, or 4
Got it.
steps, and we're basically excavating underneath to get down to create the access to the basement. But we need the Velcro door to create the staircase to get down under the porch.
Got it. And you've got the dotted lines along here.
That's the roof overhang of the
For the
existing
roof
porch.
overhang,
Yes.
exactly,
Yeah.
okay.
That I don't think counts into the setback, plus it's existing, but we're really measuring to the wall
Mhm.
surfaces of the proposed structure.
Right. Okay, go ahead.
I don't think I have any other questions. Donald?
I just, I'm just going through the side yard, I mean, I hate to harp on it, but I think it's,
Well, we'll get to that.
we gonna get to that?
Yeah.
All right, so we're not talking about comments on that? All right, so,
Well, you're suggesting that we should decide what to do so that the public could comment,
well,
or that we could decide and ask questions now? Or we could understand it and ask questions?
Well, I just think that it's important to know what are we actually deciding? Because if we're deciding that the second story addition is not a subject of a variance, and the only thing we're deciding is the emergency egress, that's one thing. If we're deciding the emergency egress and the second story addition, that's another thing. And so, I just think, we're gonna have to decide it.
You two both have more, sorry, go ahead.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I think that the board has the ability to distinguish in terms of granting the area variance for the side yard setback and limiting that variance only to the basement access, so in the future it can be construed as a structure that can continue going up. That way, where you would differentiate between the two-story structure and the variance, the area variance for the basement access.
So, well, the variance that we'll grant you is exactly for the plans that you presented, so it
Correct.
wouldn't entitle you to do any more than that. You couldn't add, as you're, hypothetically suggesting, build up that porch
Right.
to the second floor. Or you couldn't build the rest of the house out wider.
Right. And if there was no basement access proposed under this proposition, then you would need to consider the variance for the 8.2 foot, unless the small lot applies, right?
Well, I think Donald's point is very valid in that if we, the new part of the kitchen and the second, that corner of it where you're replacing the existing stairs is a new encroachment into the setback, even though the existing house is already in the setback on that side. So, if we were not to consider that, if we were to allow that to happen without a variance, then it would open up, pretty much anybody to start building, where, you know, in that line
It would,
of
yeah, it would mean that
structure.
the
I
setback
think that's what you're saying.
applied to only one story, and that you could do whatever you want.
And to get to that point, it's exactly what you're saying, to, you know, bulk it out just like that, and say simply we're replacing these, you know, by moving the roof off the back porch. And then you're now bulking out the house more to the northwest side there and going straight up but following the back line of the kitchen, the westernmost wall of the kitchen.
Well,
That way, if we were not to deal with a variance on that northwest side, if we were not to consider one, then bulking out issues would be more difficult to regulate.
So,
but I
Does
think.
that make sense?
I have a question, and I'm gonna apologize in advance if it's a stupid question, but it's kind of been our understanding, and it could be my misinterpretation of the code, but we have felt as if this is all within code.
That is,
So I guess
The
I'm
other side we're
confused
talking
as to, oh, so you're talking about,
The northwest side
so
of
this,
your house.
Yeah, it's basically,
Yeah,
there's
well,
it's
actually,
northwest and south, it's a southern,
you were looking at your backyard, looking towards Fair Street, right?
Yes, that's,
The portion of
Yeah.
the addition, which is right here, the 10-foot side yard setback goes right through there, from the property line over here. And when you're adding that portion of the second story,
right here.
right
okay, I
there.
got it, I was
That-
on the wrong side of the house.
that,
Okay.
yeah,
oh, so that's the south,
that's the issue.
southwest corner.
Okay.
Oh, you're referencing, so, let me mention something further then, with regards to the northwest side, the opposite side,
Yeah,
all right, you know, what is the setback? I mean, obviously, you've got the car
That's
park.
well,
14.6
that's-
feet.
14,
Within-
so you've got
within the
plenty,
setback,
you've got
yeah,
plenty.
yeah,
That's
that's
what I
fine.
did.
Yeah, this shaded area is 14 and a half feet from the
Okay,
property
that-
line.
That's,
So that's really
I got it.
all okay.
but you're right
We're
about this.
talking about difference between
I got
8
that.
foot
No, I
and
understand now on
10
the south
feet
side, because you're raising
on
the
this
building on the
area.
south side.
Correct, right.
Where it runs into the setback area. I see it. I was thinking a little bit more on the same on the, because I wasn't sure if that was your driveway there, or whoever's driveway
Yeah,
it is,
that's-
on the
that's
north
us.
That's
side.
the property drive.
Got it.
when we were in the work session, I just accepted that 10-foot, you know, I didn't think it twice, and I was thinking this morning and last night, oh, you know, because I have an issue with the squaring off.
And it's
But
the
by
only
the same
way,
token, I also have to say that I think by code, if they apply this, the small lot exception, which people apply, you can apply, I don't see why this doesn't apply for that, and then, you know, the only issue they have is the emergency egress. But it's not gonna stop me from making my beef about squaring off, so.
well, the thing is, it might be applicable going forward, keeping the same notion and trying to protect against bulking out. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a purpose to it. So, I mean, to the discussion you're raising, and
Should we close the public hearing and get into our discussion then? Is there any
well, no,
other?
we're still trying to thresh out what questions we might ask them though before we close. So we have to like look at some of the
Okay.
issues in case we have questions.
Well, I think the small lot exception is exactly meant for cases like this, where you have a very small lot, and you wanna have a house that you wanna have there, and when you apply that, you can go up there. I don't see any reason why we couldn't apply that.
And
But I
besides,
think you make a good point. Let's say this was a similar house without a small lot exception. Then I think you would make a good point about needing a variance for bulking it up.
and the other thing is, more precisely, it's not a small lot exception, it's a narrow lot exception.
Right.
It-
Well, I think they call it well, maybe that was urban myth, but, yeah, it's like, they don't call it,
It deals with the fact that lots on their frontage or when they're a certain width, and so
Yeah.
they're narrower.
they narrow it. It's less than 60 feet, which this is, then minimum side yard shall be reduced to 7.5 feet, provided 2 side yards shall total at least 4 inches for every foot of width.
That's correct.
They've got 45 feet, so 45 times 4 is 160 inches, that's 15 feet. And so if you take the 3.8, what, 3 foot 8 inches we're talking now,
Right.
and then you add that to 14 foot
You
7,
have 17,
you're
18
above
feet.
15 feet.
You have 18.
And if you apply it to your side yard for your addition, you add 8.2 plus 14.6, you're way over the 15. So I don't see how they don't apply. It doesn't apply. So
Well,
I think the only issue here legally is the less than 7.5 feet for the basement access, emergency basement access.
That's right.
And I would just ask you to consider in trim, in some way to break down the big form you have going, this railroad going back. Trying to, I get it, why from the inside of the planning, you want to line up the walls, but by the same token, having done it a lot of times, you can come in a little bit and you can make it work out. Got a great architect standing right there. And I'm not saying I'm just saying. And it does work out. You can make it work out, and then you can distinguish the forms of the building, which is what I think we get back to when we talk about our design code and living in the historic district, we didn't have these huge, gigantic buildings.
Yeah.
And we're getting these big buildings, and 15 years from now, what's gonna happen is the new owners, if, you guys, whatever,
They'll point to
they're
you
gonna
as
come
the
in and they're gonna
example.
say, we don't want the pergola anymore, we wanna put a 2-story addition, we have this footprint, and we're gonna square off the walls, and, and it continue, because they're still gonna be not close to the rear setback.
In that
And so-
case, wouldn't the lot coverage, wouldn't the
It
lot
would be a lot
coverage
coverage
apply?
issue.
So if
Right,
somebody said,
right.
we wanna do the,
So, then there would be a whole deal about that.
and having spent a lot of time with family and friends in Baltimore, I know what you're talking about. You're like, those apartments go on for like ever.
Right,
They're about
right.
10 feet wide and they're about a quarter, and
I mean,
that's not what
I
we
get
wanna
it,
do here.
the modern day and, the size of bedrooms and this, I understand it perfectly. But it's a tension between that and living in a historic district and the original size of these houses, Yeah, there's some mansions on Fair Street, but there's also, smaller ones. And that's, as we add on these additions and back, they don't telescope the square off and square, line up, line up, line up. And we just get these things that are longer and longer and they just feel, especially this one where you don't have anything in the back of the restaurant there. And so from the public, when I stand on the street and look at it, I see the whole side of that house. So that's my comment. Nothing
No, I
personal.
know. It came up like when we went to the historic review board 15 years ago to redo the windows, so we got the approval. And you see the windows in the house. And the guy who's doing the windows is Tyler, lives down on the golf course. He says, they're not really historic. And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, when this house was built, it was, colonial revival, so it's probably like 8/8.
Yeah.
He says, so when they did the addition, somebody said, wow, that nice Victorian house is really nice. We should put like the windows like in that Victorian house so our house looks more modern. So we went back with the review board. I was just like, what's historic? And, is it historic when they redid it in the 30s, or is it, because some people say a lot of these structures is, well, that was there in the 40s. But if you go back to, where do you go back to the original structure? So we're kind of like, that's one of our aims here, is to keep it so it looks like it belongs in Cold Spring.
I think that you should work out some trim and corner board to see if you can pop out that gable end, okay?
Okay.
And more than with just with a leader of a gutter, something so the eye, it breaks that down a little bit. In my perfect world, they would have set the original addition back like a foot, so that there was a corner, there was a real corner there.
Oh, and
But
I know what you mean.
See what I'm
Yes.
saying? But that doesn't exist anymore. So, there might be other ways that you can work on that with trim, and you could start to break that form down a little bit visually. And I shouldn't even be saying this on CBA, but I'm just saying it. Okay? So, that's for HDRB and stuff. But I think that I don't see why the small art exception doesn't apply to them, and I think the only issue is the emergency egress, which is, kind of a big nothing in terms of bulk or anything.
And the water flow runoff off the expanded, the house it's expanded a little bit to the extent that the rooftop comes further out, as long as, you know, all runoff is controlled, I mean, are there any, you see any issues there?
I believe they're all Yankee gutters, and the leaders
Well,
are staying in the same position.
The footprint of the roof of the house is the same. We don't have, there's a leader on the existing port that dumps down on the ground. That's gonna be better controlled when there's one leader that takes up the roof on both sides, and this is gonna be all tied to the existing roof leaders.
So where is the
So-
water, once it comes down through the leaders,
Well,
where does it end up?
It goes in the driveway, and there's drainage within the driveway.
It's a pervious driveway, or there's actually drainage?
It's actually a
Drain.
drain in the back.
Okay.
It was up until 2
Yeah,
years ago.
but we
yeah.
installed a drain back there.
You can go to NDS Supply up on Route 9 and you can get these plastic pots, bury them with gravel around them and put your stormwater in there. It solves the problem. It's dirt cheap.
We do that often. There's Caltech, is one of
There
the
you go.
manufacturers.
Yeah, Caltech.
And there are different shapes and sizes where you basically create a void underground,
Yeah,
and that allows the water to
put some filter
infiltrate.
fabric around them, they last.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
and you got an access from the top so you can see
Yeah,
if there's an issue.
it can be
It's
maintained.
a good way to deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You'll save yourself a lot of headache if you do that.
Any other questions?
Any other questions, anybody?
I'm good with it.
Public comment?
So the roof is actually gonna be there is slightly more roof because you're pushing all the way out to the side though.
True, but we're also removing the existing porch on the back.
Right. Gotcha.
The lot coverage is a wash, so the roof, by the same token, is
And
exactly.
the drains are gonna go to the side though, not to the middle of the yard.
That's right, yeah.
We'll actually lose this drain from the porch, which is a major headache in the springtime, because it dumps the
It
water
dumps
right
into
out in
the
the middle of
back.
the yard
Right,
where you
right.
come off
And
the
the porch.
porch.
Okay.
And I'm actually on the south side. This one actually has where it comes off here. So I don't know what that date backs to, but that is into the existing drainage structure that's always been on 5 Fair Street. And on the north side,
There's
that one
one-
leads into the driveway drain when they replace the driveway.
Kathleen, change your mind on the question?
No, but just listening to your
All right.
observations.
We close the public hearing?
No comment from the public? No
No.
public here?
Annette,
That's it. All right, so I make a motion to close the public hearing?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Public hearing is closed. So I think then what we wanna do is essentially rewrite the application to use the small lot, or the narrow lot, rule. And,
I think,
instead of the side yard.
I agree, no question. I mean, it's below the 60 feet width, there's no reason why it wouldn't apply.
Donald, it sounded like you calculated that out.
Yeah, so, standards of the small lot exception are, the lot has to be less than 60 feet wide and the lot's 45 feet wide. And therefore you can have one side yard at 7.5 feet, which would be applied to the, I kinda call it the east side. It's the side where they have the proposed basement access.
The Main Street side.
That's the Main Street side. And they're asking for I calculate a 3-foot 10-inch variance from the required 7.5 foot side yard setback.
I agree with that. And again, that provision goes further to simply say,
And then-
this as long as you have 15 total feet side yard setbacks.
Well, they need
Fine.
4 inches for every
Right, 4 inches.
foot of lot width.
That's correct.
and both side yards total have to equal, be more than that. And so 4 inches times 45 feet, it ends up being, they need 15-foot total side yard, and they will have, at minimum, 3 foot 8 inches plus 14 foot 7. So that's 15, 17 foot, 18 foot 3 inches. They'll have a minimum of 18 foot 3 inches total, which is more
Which
than the
exceeds the
required 15 feet.
Right,
Okay.
so it meets the combined side yard setback requirement of 15 feet.
And tell me the variance on the,
They're gonna be
Street side.
needing a 3 foot 10 inch variance from the required 7.5, 3 foot 10 inch variance from the required 7.5 foot side yard setback.
okay. All right, should we, run through our criteria?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bring out my handy thing. Okay, so first, so now we're gonna go through and consider the, some criteria that the state law mandates we consider, and we balance those out to arrive at a decision. So, number one, can the benefit be achieved by other means, by any other feasible means?
Well, the benefit sought is to expand the house, but because it's a small, narrow lot, and the lot itself is small and has already met the maximum coverage area, the benefit sought more than likely couldn't be achieved by any other means, except for the fact that the other criteria is self-created, but we'll get to that. They're limited by the lot size to what they can do. What do you think, Donald?
Well, yeah, I think that they have a right, they have a legal right to do exactly what they propose when you look at the side yard, when you look at the small lot exception. And so they shouldn't be penalized for a code issue with emergency egress, which isn't expanding, it's not expanding their habitable square footage to do that, to get out of their basement per code. So we shouldn't penalize them for taking advantage of what is legally theirs, their right to do, by saying they could get their basement emergency egress from their basement by any other means. I mean, it's by nature, it's gonna go somewhere.
But it already
probably within a
exists.
setback. What?
But it already exists at this point.
Yeah, but it
In order
conflicts
to-
with something that they can also legally do.
Right.
If they were asking for a variance for that part, it'd be another story.
Right.
But kinda like they're damned if they do, damned if they don't kind of thing, so.
Okay, I agree with the points made. Do anybody wanna add anything else to that?
That's good.
No.
Number two, the proposed application will or will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood.
Adding an emergency egress will not change the character of the neighborhood. Well,
I believe, adding that back end of the, projecting out the second floor area to the west will affect a little bit just the bulk appearance of the structure. And, in relation to the other neighboring buildings that are all on small lots in the near vicinity.
right, um. The only concern that, my concern is similar to John's, and I don't think that we have any, we can really comment or do anything about that because it is within, they're not asking for a variance for that. And there would be there would be another way, if they wanted to expand the house this much, there would be another way.
So we're only gonna comment with regards to whatever
No,
affects with
I think,
regards to
I'm
the
sorry,
variance.
I think we can comment on, I didn't mean to say we couldn't comment on it, but I'm not sure we can base our decision on that.
I understand that point.
But I do agree that when you're looking down that row of houses between Fair and Stone, it's nice you can see, it's open, 4-foot fences, you can see all the way down there, it's kind of nice. The variance anything else for anyone?
No?
The variances requested are or are not substantial.
Variance requested, I don't think it's substantial. I mean, it might be substantial in terms of asking for a 3-foot 10-inch and required 7.5 feet, but again, we're not asking for a variance for habitable space here, we're asking for a
narrow
variance for a
projection.
Bilko hatch, right?
Yeah,
Essentially,
so it's
Bilko
a
hatch.
narrow
very low, it's only,
structure.
what is it?
18 inches of the ground.
Exactly, I mean, it's relatively inconsequential.
It's not like the whole side of a house is being moved.
Right, if it was the whole side of the house, that'd be another story, but it's not.
Or two.
It'd be 2 stories. And you could comment that there's been a slight decrease in the lot coverage with the removal of the roof from the deck.
Okay. Okay, the proposed variance will or will not have an adverse effect or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district.
I don't see the variance as having an effect in any way on the aspects of the neighborhood and its appearance. I don't see anything. What do you think?
No, I don't, I think it's not substantial, it's de minimis, it's a Bilko hatch. It's not gonna have any impact on the environmental nor character of the neighborhood.
And I think that's primarily for the reasons we just
Yeah.
talked about in the previous point. Okay. The alleged difficulty necessitating the variance was or was not self-created and is or is not sufficient so as to cause a denial of the requested variance.
Well, it's self-created in part because they've already had the back access, but they're expanding the house, so they had to put that somewhere else in order not to increase the lot coverage size. So it's a mixed bag. In part, it's self-created. I mean, usually these are self-created matters. I mean, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think they're always pretty much self-created.
Yeah.
thankfully, we don't have to find, we could even say it was self-created, but we don't have to find we don't have to be, we don't have to, be in the positive about all 5, of our
Criteria.
standards. So, you know, it's self-created, but it's kinda so what, into the Bilko hatch. It's not, not substantial. It's not even close to being substantial.
But in addition to that, it was just, they had to move it somewhere,
Yeah.
if they were
Yeah,
gonna,
they gotta meet code.
to not expand the footprint of the house.
Right.
Lot coverage, to avoid that, they had to move it.
So now we're down to our balancing statement. I think, you know, we've heard Donald's important points about the way houses get built up and continue to get bigger. And those are valid points. We're not able to rule on that, though. That's more of, maybe the Historic District Review Board can work on some of that if they choose. The only thing we're voting on is the small setback variance for the side, for the covered basement access and entrance to the house. In my opinion, I think that this balance is in favor of granting the variance. Donald, what do you think?
I agree.
I agree, I mean, mostly because of, as Donald had mentioned, the small size of the structure on the side of the house for the access. Relatively insubstantial and doesn't, you know, really affect that greatly the side yard variance on the south side of the house.
Okay, so I'm gonna read this back and then I'm gonna clean it up a little bit later before it, if we approve or deny it, I'll clean it up. So, Resolution 02-2018. In the matter of the application of Kathy and Jennifer Gordonier for the addition to the main structure at 5 Fair Street in the R1 district, whereas Kathy and Jennifer Gordonier are the owners of real property located at 5 Fair Street, Cold Spring R1 zoning district, also identified as tax map parcel 48.8-1-1. And whereas Kathy and Jennifer Gordonier have made application to the Cold Spring Zoning Board of Appeals for a side yard setback pursuant to 134-7C5, and I'm going to update that to also include the small or the narrow yard variance. And I'm removing the front yard because that was does not belong there. The current side yard setback is 8 feet. The proposed is 7 feet 8 inches. With the small, the narrow yard rule, we need 15 feet combined setback, and then we'll have 18 feet 3 inches. The Bilko door and covered area is 3 foot 10 inches from the 7.5 foot side yard setback. Did I
No.
get those numbers
Yeah,
right?
it's,
3 yards.
I would, it's, the Bilko has is 3 foot 8 inches from the property line, but in a way, that's not really the issue of the variance. They're asking for they need 7.5 feet. So you would subtract.
As a minimum side yard setback on that side.
Right, and so you would subtract, the 3'8" from the 7
foot
foot 6, and I think you get 3'10". And so that, they're asking for a 3'10" variance
Right,
from the
that's-
required 7.5 feet. That's what they're asking for. That's what we would be granting.
Whereas the
3'10" variance from the required 7.5 feet.
Whereas the proposed action constitutes a type 2 action under NYCRR Part 617, and therefore no further review under the State Environmental Quality Review Act is required, whereas a public hearing was held on the application at the Village Office, Cold Spring, New York, April 5th, 2018, whereas the Cold Spring Zoning Board of Appeals has given careful consideration of the facts presented in the application and at the public hearing, and finds that the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by any other feasible means. The benefit is to expand the house, and the benefit cannot be achieved by other means. The applicant cannot easily create the emergency egress from the basement by other means. The proposed application will not produce an undesirable change in the character of the neighborhood. Adding the emergency egress will not change the character of the neighborhood. Increasing the length and height of the back part of the house is in some ways a detriment to the neighborhood because of the increased bulk. However, that is not under consideration for our vote. The various variances requested are not substantial because the expansion is low and narrow, relatively inconsequential, even though the variance, the measurement of the variance itself is a substantial part of the required setback. There's a mitigating factor that there's also been a slight decrease in the lot coverage with the removal of the back porch. The proposed variance will not have an adverse effect on or impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood or district for the reasons above. The alleged difficulty necessitating the variance was self-created and is not sufficient so as to cause a denial of the requested variance. And in balance, after a detailed review of each of the variance requested, the board finds that it is granting the minimum variance necessary to complete this project, and balance the findings on each criteria fully support the granting of Resolution 02/2018. Now therefore be it resolved that the Cold Spring Zoning Board of Appeals hereby grants the application of Kathy and Jennifer Gordonier for the side and front yard setbacks requested pursuant to the board's powers and duties described in section 134-24 and 134-25 of the Cold Spring Village Code. So, if somebody would like to make a motion, then we can take a vote.
Make a motion, I guess we approve the language of the resolution, and we vote.
I'll second that
Okay.
we approve the language as Aaron's written and read, and I would vote in favor of the resolution to grant the variance.
Okay, so calling the vote?
Aye.
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 Thank you very
So-
much. Thank you for your thorough review.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good luck.
So this will get submitted to Jeff, and he will pass it on to the inspector, and then you'll get a building permit, and you have to wait for that.
Thank you, and we meet with Kathleen's team next week.
Yes.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thanks a lot.
Let's see, just to point out with Donald, listen, when you read through all that, one of the reasons why I felt they were constricted, couldn't achieve what the other means is because it's small. And although it's mentioned with regards to other matters, that they were restricted really do with the property. That goes in the balance.
I can't quite hear what.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's one of the,
Thank you guys.
Good night.
I think it's criteria number 3, the substantial part.
Oh, yeah.
I just didn't hear him mention that they were constricted in part. It wasn't a substantial request, or whether it could be achieved by other means, because the property itself is
Okay.
small. And just to mention that the property itself is small but narrow, size of lot. So there's really very little they can do to maneuver around.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be on the perimeter of the building someplace, and it's exterior, you know, access.
Right.
They're limited.
Right, I just was,
Yeah.
I thought that was the biggest factor that we were dealing with here, just to make sure it was mentioned.
Okay, I've got that down, and I think that also goes to the first one, cannot be achieved.
So, Donald, if I could mention that, you know, I think it's important that we sort of do go over the language a little bit like we just did, as if we even do with minutes, just because this is what's gonna govern in the end.
Yeah, I agree.
Would
No, I agree.
you like to review this
You
again?
wanna
after-
circulate it? To
Yeah.
circulate the,
Yeah, I think language
sure that we're all
is
in
pretty
agreement.
important, cause we all understand what we did,
I
and
would-
it's on
I think it's hard to write a decision right here.
point
Yeah.
blank.
So, I get it, what you're doing, but why don't you just circulate it a little bit?
Sure, I'm
Yeah.
following Greg's
No,
Greg's
Greg wrote
methodology
them
more
right,
or
wrote
less.
them right on the spot.
Yeah, and then I think he cleaned them up also, but we didn't really look at them after.
Yeah, but
so-
you shouldn't have to, you should just give us a window, say, if you want to comment, read this over, comment, let me know right away.
Yeah.
And I think that's the best way to do it, because this is what becomes binding and for us to follow.
And we can, I mean, if.
And
if
I don't
this
want to
were-
make this more difficult for you.
If there were something questionable here, we could also run it by our lawyer, but I don't think there is.
I think the key to this is that it's, you know, it's insubstantial, it's a Bill Cohen.
Yes, but the language in here gives guidance when people come back to say, well, what was done, what was
Yeah.
resolved?
Right.
You know, otherwise we have to go through the entire minutes to
Right.
figure out exactly what we were getting at, in part. So language in that is important.
So, I think, you know, if you wanted to circulate it, then, you know, we won't be stopping them from, you know, moving ahead.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
Well, I'm gonna be out of town next week, so most likely I'll get this out to you tomorrow, and then if you could get it back to me,
Within, give us like, you know, half a day.
and I can get it to Jeff.
And I'll just give you comments on an email, I'll just type it out to you or forward it or something.
Okay,
Right,
And this way, it doesn't hold you up, I don't wanna make your job any more difficult. And while it's fresh in our minds, it's best.
yeah, all of this is not to make your job more difficult.
no, I understand.
Okay. Yeah, no.
In fact, we almost wanna help.
I would, you know, that's why, I wanna keep things moving, but I also want us to have clean language that will be understandable
Yeah,
in the future.
yeah.
So, we don't have anything else. We have a set of minutes, but I don't think we're gonna review them tonight. I didn't bring copies. And our next meeting is on, today's the 5th, so the 29th, yeah. The 19th.
When's the next meeting?
Is there one schedule?
Should be, right? We don't have anything before us at this point, but
I thought there was something about a fence.
we don't have any applications.
Oh, that was just issued.
Yeah, Jeff has
yeah.
been sending us the referrals.
Right.
Okay,
just
so
we're-
you'll let us know like maybe a few days in advance if
Yes.
suddenly,
yes, it will.
yeah. I didn't realize I didn't put it in my phone for the 5th, and I'm sitting at my desk at 5:22 today, and
Oh, today?
I was at my office last night till 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
That's how backed up we are.
So I guess we could say,
What else is new?
at
you
this
know-
point,
You're always that way.
at this point, there's no meeting scheduled, but if there
Good.
is, it'll be
All right.
online.
And he knows what we're doing with Little Stony Point too. But I moved to close the meeting, by the way. All in favor?
You moved,
Aye.
aye.
Adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.
But that Little Stony
Could
Point.
you email me the advertisement says the name and the property and the
Yeah.
tax map, blah, 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 so I can
I'll do
put
that
that
right now.
into the minutes. Thank you.